In this video, we'll listen to a ribboning account of a UFO encounter by a Canberra pilot. The English Electric Canberra was Britain's first jet-powered medium bomber. It was developed in the mid to late 40s in response to World War II. And so among the performance requirements was extremely high altitude bombing capability and high speed. And so that plays into this encounter. He actually climbs up to 50,000 feet to try and get a better look at this object that they see. And it's multiple witnesses that actually see it.
Chris Lehto, welcome to Lehto Files.
So retired pilot Jeremy Lane went on the Cold War Conversations podcast. He talks about his intense experiences from training for nuclear bombing missions with the Canberra aircraft. It was a nuclear delivery aircraft. He never actually flew with a live nuclear weapon, thankfully, but it was on training missions, a night training mission where I actually saw this UFO. The actual nuclear codes required dual control from both the US president and the British prime minister. I thought that was interesting. He relays this at all the hour-long podcast, and then at the very end, he talks about his UFO encounter. So before they talked about quick reaction duties, how they were on immediate deployment. He also talks about how they had to get additional verification that they were cleared for nuclear missions. He ended up being a wing weapons officer, actually, so pretty high level, at least. Seems credible member of the Air Force. So let's listen to Jeremy Lane's encounter with UFO during a night flight exercise in his Canberra aircraft.
IBM, and so in Glasgow, and so I did. My first paycheck with IBM was at least double what I was earning when I was a flight lieutenant in the Air Force on flying pay. And it went on from there. And I stayed there for 5 years, and then I left and set up my own business and worked at that until I was nearly 70. Well, I'm sure I was 70, yeah. And then I retired from my work at 70, and now I'm living the retirement.
Jeremy, you've been really generous with your time. I really appreciate you sharing your story. I've just got one quick question. Tell me about your close encounter with a UFO.
So here I am, I'm at West Raynham now, and I'm flying target Canberras for Lightning, which was still our frontline defense aircraft, and we were doing intercepts, so they would intercept us at high level, pretending to be Russian airplanes. That's what we did. And we also pretended, for purposes of air defense in the United Kingdom, we would fly in from different directions, testing the defenses of the UK.
Okay, pause it there. So what he's saying is basically they're acting as Red aircraft. So Red Air was an aggressor in Alaska, and that was our primary job, was only to be the Red Air. So the practice team to really, like he said, testing the defenses. So they would fly in as if they're enemy bombers. They pretend to be enemy bombers, maybe use the tactics and some systems, if they can, of the enemy, and to test the actual surface-to-air defenses. So that was what the mission was this night. All right, back to the podcast.
So on this particular occasion, I had been detached in Scotland, and we were going to fly back to base. So it was the end of the detachment, and the idea was to fly at night. We were tasked to fly north for the United Kingdom up towards the Shetlands, and then fly back south as if we were Russian airplanes, and then fly back to base in Norfolk. So the general operating height was around about 34,000 feet, 36,000 feet, maybe 38. And we were a stream of aircraft. So it wasn't just me, there were the whole of the detachment. So I think something like 8 aircraft were flying in a stream, and I was probably number 4 or 5. And it was a very, very clear night. And we were flying pretty much due north when this shape appeared in the sky above. And I had myself and my navigator, who was in the back, and also another ground crew member I was flying back to West Raynham. So he was in the cockpit with me, and this shape started to appear and was very distinct. it was a sort of Concorde shape wing, if you like, if you can imagine the shape of a Concorde, pointing north-south and with lights pulsating all the way around the perimeter.
Okay, stop it there. So basically they're in a line of 8 aircraft. So 8 aircraft, and he has a ground crew member sitting next to him up in the cockpit, and it sounds like the navigator is in the back, he said. I'm not sure if the navigator could actually see up, but the ground crew member could definitely see. And he has, you can see from the bubble canopy, you can see quite easily up. But what's interesting about this case is there's 8 aircraft, right? So you're looking at 16 people, potentially more, if they can peek around the back, that see this object. And so he's up in the 30s, so mid-30s, he says, maybe up to 38,000. Because they're probably not all at the same altitude. Normally you want to offset your altitudes just in case you kind of, lose track of where the other plane is. You want to be offset altitude. So they're already up pretty high. And then he says he sees a Concorde shape, so like a triangle-shaped object above him. And it's pulsating and has a certain pulsating frequency he'll talk about here. So many people, up to at least 16 people, are out there to actually witness this thing.
And pulsating at, half-second intervals, something like that. Very, very clear and extraordinary sight. Never seen anything like this before. Anyway, so I reported it to the ground controller who was controlling the airspace. And he said, it's been reported by crews who've gone up before you.
That's amazing to me. So it's already been reported by other aircraft, meaning it must have been there for who knows how long, right? Let's see.
We're really not sure what it is. You can't see anything on radar. It's 60, they could see up to 60,000 feet with the air defense radars that they had. And nothing could be seen. So it would suggest that this thing was either invisible to radar or very high and large. But of course you can't tell, you've got no reference point. So we're looking at this thing and saying, well, is that just a couple of thousand feet above us and just, quite small, no more than the size of an aircraft like mine, or is it miles away and big? Well, you couldn't tell because you got no reference point. So I decided that I would climb the aircraft up. So if we came south and it was still there, I'd be another 10,000 feet higher. The operational height, the maximum height you could fly in a Canberra was about 48,000 feet. So, and it was cold, but a beautiful, beautiful clear night. And so we were coming south, and we'd have been north of Edinburgh. We'd have been somewhere, the Fife, I think, somewhere like that, when we came south. And this thing was still there, still flashing away, still pointing north-south. So the sharp end of the thing was pointing north. And it didn't change size at all. So it was clearly a long way away.
Okay, so Jeremy decides to climb, right? So it sounds like they go north. So they kind of maybe go on their mission, and then they come back around south near Edinburgh, and it's still there. But he can't tell how far away it is, right? It's very difficult. There's no references. There's absolutely no references. And it sounds like it's higher than 60,000 feet, which seems kind of impossible in his mind, right? Because the Canberra was setting the altitude records, at least in the late 50s, it set the altitude records. And even in the late 60s here, there's not many aircraft that can fly over 50,000 feet. I flew the F-16, and we could not fly over 50,000 feet. That was our service ceiling. So he climbs this thing up another 10,000 feet. He said almost up to 50,000 feet, so up to 48,000 feet, the max ceiling on the aircraft. And he said it didn't change size at all. Meaning, how far away is this thing that it doesn't change any size when you get 1.5 miles more vertical, right? Closer to it, another 1.5 miles closer, and yet it doesn't change size at all. So very interesting that it must have been far away and quite large is what he ends up deciding.
So there was no visible change in the size of this thing. And so we by now got all 3 members of the, they're all out having a, and very soon when we got underneath it, or not underneath it, but I could see I could see Paris from where I was at nearly 50,000 feet. I could see Paris from Edinburgh or thereabouts. It was such a clear night, extraordinary night. And anyway, this thing suddenly lit up, completely bright light, and within a nanosecond, I mean, just so fast, I saw the flash as it disappeared off into the southern hemisphere, and it was gone. It was just gone. And quite an extraordinary sight. And we came down, everybody came down the stream of aircraft. And the first thing we did when we got down was to get everybody to draw what they'd seen, to make sure it wasn't some kind of, hallucination, if you like. And so we did. And everybody drew the same thing. And so it got put up to headquarters somewhere. I don't know. It ended up, people say there was some desk but nobody ever contacted us to ask us to share any detailed information about it.
Okay, so amazing account how it disappears, right? In a flash, she said it actually went unimaginable speed south. So it did go a certain direction, like shot that direction. It mentioned it was pulsating about every half second. So pulsating lights. As we see in all these cases, there's always some interesting lights associated with these things. And then unimaginable speed. So that was instantaneous acceleration, hypersonic velocities without any visible signs of thrust. And then the altitude it's at. Kevin Knuth says, why do we say these are spacecraft or could be spacecraft? And the point is because they're going at spacecraft speeds. They're doing spacecraft things. Right? So this is back in the late 60s. Very few aircraft we have now can fly over 50,000 feet, much less back then. The Canberra was one of the highest altitude fighters, bombers at the time, one of the highest altitude planes. So they climb up to its max ceiling, and this thing's still so far above it that even when they climb 10,000 feet, doesn't change any size of it, meaning it's quite far away and very large. And then it just accelerates away at unimaginable speed. And they had everyone come down and draw it, and they all drew the same thing. And they hear nothing about it ever. So if they report anything, it's just not going to get sent to anyone. It's just going to go away into a trash bin, essentially. No one asked him anything about this miraculous sighting. Nothing seen on air defense radar, but did they have higher radars? Did they have, ballistic missile defense radar at the time? I'm not sure. Do they have other types of radars? Is anything tracked in space? None of these questions even considered.
Well, there's a subsequent bit to this tale, which is that I went up to Kinloss on a trip one day. I don't remember why I was there, but I was there overnight because I remember sitting with another mate of mine who I'd seen, he was flying Nimrods. And I was recounting this story to him, and he said, "Oh, that's not unusual. We've seen that before. That's been around." So, what do you make of that?
Wow. I mean, the fact you've got multiple corroborations there, and the clearness of the night, it's not clouds or anything like that. It's, you know what things look like in the air.
Yeah. Well,
wow.
Yeah. But I can't explain it, but it was just, something out of this world, for sure.
So if you want to hear the full conversation with Jeremy Lane, link is in the description. Quite interesting. Listen to the whole podcast. Thanks to Patrick for the idea. If you have a interesting conversation like this or interesting topic for a video, you can send your ideas to chris.lehto16@gmail.com. Just put show idea in the description and we will check it out. Thank you for watching. Please hit the like button. It really helps and it's free. Consider subscribing to get future notifications of when I release videos. And you might like this video. If you want to support the channel, join these great people over here, get exclusive bonus content, then click this button here, patreon.com/Chris Lehto, or become a YouTube member. If you want to continue the discussion, go to UAP Society Discord. Links are all in the description. Have a great rest of your day. Peace.